Hello, OBC family, and I do hope that you're able to enjoy this beautiful weather that we've been having over the past few days. And is it just me, or does it feel like the days are starting to get longer as the temperatures are getting warmer and warmer outside? But with that good news also came some more difficult news that we heard this past Monday, and that is another month of tighter COVID restrictions that are being instituted by our province. And that means us needing to once again put a pause on our Sunday morning gatherings at OBC. So for the next 4 weeks, all of our Sunday services will once again be shifting to an online format. Like you, I had a lot of mixed emotions when I heard that whole list of new restrictions being rattled off. But I was reminded this morning of the story in Acts chapter 17, where Paul was deeply troubled by all the idols that he was seeing as he was walking down the streets of Athens. If you remember that story, he had been spending his days in the synagogues and in the public squares, really trying to reason with the Jewish people as well as God-fearing Gentiles. And he was making a case for Christ, really, wherever it was that he ended up. One day in particular, he ended up in a debate with some philosophers. And when he told them about Jesus and his resurrection, it was fascinating that they questioned him, and this is what they said: "Who is this foreign God that this man is talking about?" Now, being philosophers, they were naturally curious about this new teaching because they'd never heard of it before. So they decided to invite Paul to come and speak to the high council of the city. So I want you to picture this with me, okay? Because Paul is standing before the council, and this is what he says to them. He says, "Men of Athens, I notice that you are very religious in every way. For as I was walking along, I saw your many shrines. And one of your altars had this inscription on it: 'To an unknown God.' This God whom you worship without knowing is the one that I am telling you about." And this altar, this specific altar that Paul is talking about, has a very interesting backstory to it, because supposedly this unknown God had protected the people of Athens from an epidemic that was wreaking havoc in the countries all around them. As history tells us, the Athenians had presented offerings from multiple gods who either weren't able to help or just simply didn't care enough to even respond to their requests for help. Finally, they had one secular oracle that came to them one day and told them that they had had a vision from this new God. He told them that this new God had revealed to him that they were being held accountable for their many sins. And if they wanted to be freed from the epidemic, then they needed to do a few things. Firstly, they needed to bring a flock of sheep into the town square. Secondly, they needed to watch carefully to see where the first sheep of that flock chose to lay down. Thirdly, they were to build an altar in the exact spot where that sheep laid down. And finally, they were to sacrifice that specific sheep on that specific altar. As the story goes, they did all of that, and immediately after sacrificing that sheep, the epidemic ended. So now here Paul is talking to this council of philosophers who are very well aware of this particular altar's backstory. And Paul is about to give them some more information about who this unknown God was. And as I'm reading these words from Acts chapter 17, I want you to remember that this is the same God who sees you today in the midst of our global pandemic. This is what Paul says to the people. Paul says, "He is the God who made the world and everything in it. Since he is Lord of heaven and earth, he doesn't live in man-made temples or churches, I might just add, and human hands can't serve his needs, for he has no needs. He himself gives life and breath to everything, and he satisfies every need. From one man, he created all the nations throughout the whole earth. He decided beforehand when they should rise and fall, and he determined their boundaries. His purpose was for the nations to seek after God and perhaps feel their way towards him and find him. though he is not far from any of us. And then he closes it with this. He says, for in him we live and move and exist. So, why am I telling you this story this morning? Well, today I think it's become far too easy for a lot of us to become like those Athenian philosophers who seem to be good at questioning everything. And like them, we see this epidemic, or in our case, it's a global pandemic. We see it everywhere. We can't escape it. Like them as well, we turn to various sources trying to find answers. And no matter where we look, there are either no answers or there are conflicting answers, right? I mean, scientists, doctors, experts, politicians, all come to us with what they hope is truth, what they hope is the answer. But in the midst of all that, COVID just keeps raging on and on. So what I love so much about this passage is that Paul is simply reminding the people and reminding us of who it is that is still in charge. Again, this is what Paul says. He says, he is the God who made the world and everything in it. Paul says, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, he doesn't live in man-made temples, and human hands can't serve his needs, for he has no needs. Paul says, he himself gives life and breath to everything. And Paul says, he satisfies every need. In other words, God is the one who made the earth. God is the one who made us. And God is the one who is still in charge, even in the midst of our global pandemic. And this is such a great reminder to us that I think we all need to hold on to as things around us seem to be spinning out of control yet again. Paul is reminding us that God is the one who is still in charge. And that means that we don't have to be afraid for our lives, and we don't need to be afraid of what the future is going to hold. None of us like this. None of us want this to stay. We hope all of this is going to be over a lot sooner rather than later. And I personally look forward to the day when we can be all meeting under the same roof again. But just because we can't meet under the same roof on Sundays, my friends, does not mean that God is not in charge. God is still in charge of what is happening around us. You know, the fact that God loved the Athenians enough to be with them in their epidemic was really quite amazing, especially when they didn't even know his name. But I think what is even more incredible than that is that God loved the Athenians so much that he sent Paul to tell them his name. And because of this, we too can know that he sees us and he knows what we're experiencing. For those of you who are struggling with maybe mental health issues or depression, those of you who struggle with loneliness, know that God sees you even in the midst of what we're going through right now. I also want you to know that if there's anything at all that we can do for you as a church, please do not hesitate to call the church office or one of our deacons. We would love to be there to support and encourage you and pray for you. And if you have physical needs, we'd love to be able to help meet those as well. Please know that we love you, and Lord bless.